we've got Patrice Porter here, who is well known as the gardening grandma for her love of nature, and who she opens the world of gardening to children in her community, helping them blossom like the flowers she tends. Tell us, Patrice, about your love of gardening and nature and your passion for helping children garden.
Well, as a child, I feel very fortunate that my dad had instilled that love of nature in me very young. He used to take me out for field trips, and it would be like to the sand dunes, to the forest, and there'd be biologists there, and I'd get to ask all these questions, and I just loved being out there and exploring, and there was even one time I was in the forest, and I'd go and pick all these plants and flowers and run up to the biologist and said, "What's this? What's this?" And one time I came up, I had picked a flower, and I came up to him and I said, "What's this?" And he says, "Where did you get that? Where did you get that?" And I went and I showed him, and we looked around. It was the only one, and it was a rare flower. But it was a really good lesson. I learned that you just don't go picking willy-nilly out in the wilderness. Always make sure that you leave enough so that the plants can propagate themselves, and there'll be plants for in the future. A lesson learned. But and he used to take me to the wildlife films. This was before the internet, but at the museum it would have the wildlife films, and I loved that, watching about all the birds, and these were like National Geographic explorers and stuff that were bringing in the films, but it's not the same as being out there in the real thing and get to experiencing like all the scents and smells, sights, sounds, the whole experience. And it's something like I would love to see more of the kids have that love of nature instilled them at a young age, for it's something that served me very well throughout my life, and it could serve them too. And it's so sad. We were taking a group of kids out on a field trip out to the forest. They're in grade 6, and we got out there, and all they wanted to do was get home and get back on their devices. There was like, when are we going home? When are we going home? Like, they were just absolutely missing everything that was going on around them. And it wasn't until I had actually found some wild edibles and I pointed them out. And then, okay, that catches the kids' attention. If food and kids.
Food.
There's a little hint for you, moms. Kids will drop their devices if they're hungry and need some food. Yeah. But it's also, it's that connection of food and getting the kids off their devices, like get them actually out and gardening and growing their own food. And it's a way to give them an alternative to just being on their devices. And that was something.
Can I ask, do you find that there's an age that it's best to introduce them?
Oh, for gardening?
Yeah.
Any age, like let them be there with you, playing in the dirt and exploring, and like to work independently in the garden. Usually about, 7 years old, they can, do things. And I always encourage the parents to let the kids do all they can in the garden, mm-hmm. and with that, it's like, I don't want the kids to see gardening as like a chore or something. So I'd like it to be like a garden of their own, or a space of their own that they can garden in. And I always start off with the kids. I ask them, I say, like, what type of garden would you like to have? And you'd be really surprised. My grandniece said she wanted a Halloween garden. We got, the pumpkins, the white skinned pumpkins. It's like ghosts in the pumpkin patch. And she said she wanted sweets and I had a stevia plant, which is 10 times sweeter than sugar. So we made cuttings, and she wanted a black cat, and I happened to have a wooden black cat silhouette, and we got some orange and black colored flowers for the Halloween theme. But, let the kids have a garden of their own, have it be a space that they're going to enjoy spending time in. And with that, if it's a garden of their own, let them take responsibility for it. And, like, who here would rather have their kids going on a trajectory of being more independent and responsible, or rather than just looking to their devices and for those dopamine hits and just looking to entertain themselves?
Yeah, that's very well put. And I can see that there's probably a lot of life lessons you get from gardening. Yeah,
well, as I said, like the gardening, it is a garden of their own. It's mm-hmm. like a commitment, and it is mm-hmm. a responsibility. You're going to have living things relying on you. Mm-hmm. And so to learn to take responsibility, and if you're involved all the way from planning out your garden to bringing in the harvest, you start to become more independent there too. And the idea of patience is always, if you're growing what you want to be growing, you can be a little bit more patient, knowing you're going to be rewarded with delicious foods or beautiful blossoms or whatever it is that you're wishing to grow. And so it can teach that patience, delayed gratification, which is so needed, instead of, just wanting to be on their devices. But another, hint for the moms, like if you're having trouble getting their kids off of the devices, remember, food and kids. Good combinations. And like I say, have it be a garden of their own, but do it together with them too. If you can even like have a family garden, and they could have their own plot and things that they're responsible for, but then you can start planning out your garden together, like what kind of things do you want to grow? Maybe start thinking of some recipes you could make with that. And then you could start getting the kids involved in preparing some of those recipes. Another life lesson, cooking and or life skill, cooking and preparing your food.
Yeah, I can see them pulling something out of their garden and wanting to actually follow through with the rest of the cooking process now, because they want to see how it gets from their garden to their plate, right?
Yeah, and one thing, if the kids are growing it, they're more likely to eat it too, and they're learning like where their food comes from, and if they develop that taste for that fresh garden food, then as they're older, maybe off on their own, like they're not so likely to be reaching for the convenient foods and junk foods. They'll be looking for that real food. And I'll tell you though, if once the kids taste that fresh garden food, they don't want to go back to the store-bought stuff.
Yeah.
So it's
My husband doesn't even want me to cook his food. He's like, I just want the vegetables like crisp and fresh, and because that's how he grew up, with fresh vegetables that he would just pick right out of the garden and eat straight away. So he didn't even want them cooked.
Yeah, no, and it's great. You can send your kids out to the garden if they want a snack. Go pick some peas, pull a carrot, dessert, go cook some raspberries, but when you're introducing the kids to the gardening too, like have it be a space that they're going to enjoy being in. So if it's something that, ask them what they'd like to have, what type of garden, and get them involved all the way from planning it out to bringing in the harvest. That's really important when it's them that brings in the the harvest, and it's them that's contributing to the family food supply. It just does wonders for their confidence, like, I can do this, and that they're actually contributing members now. And
love it.
but if you get the kids starting to garden, ensure that you give them some early successes so they don't get just disappointed and it's like, oh, that didn't work. I'm not, we
don't start with like bamboo that takes 5 years to grow.
Yeah. No. We want to have lifelong gardeners. So,
okay.
So if you can make sure, start off small to begin with so they don't get overwhelmed. And, you can always expand later. It might just be a single pot. Like I like the idea of I call them a salad bowl, where it's one container. They can have all the different things, plants growing in there for their fresh salads. Cool. And then they can expand, or one raised box, and then, expand as they're more able to. And get to know your climate too. Figure out, you can actually go online, do a Google search for your data, your average data, weather data for average temperatures, freezing, expected freezing dates, rainfalls, and then you'll know, and get to know your plants too, like what plants like to grow in the cooler temperature, what plants like to grow in the warmer temperature, or there's a sweet spot where anything will grow. But if you know your climate, you know what plants will grow there, then you don't kind of waste all your effort, trying to grow something that really isn't suited.
Yeah, I could see this being used as homeschool moms as curriculum, and involving the science, and just with the research of the natural temperatures and all those things.
Yeah,
and
the weather. That's a part of the curriculum, is the weather things, but lots of science and parents. The kids, as they're gardening, I actually have the Got Dirt Gardening for Kids program, and it takes them the step-by-step, all the way from planning out their gardening to bringing in the harvest. But I've got the Roots to Learning, where the academic lessons are combined with the growing the garden, starting your garden. And so they'll be learning their math, science, literacy, all while they're learning that life skill of gardening. And so then they're learning that in a real life situation. It's hands-on, practical ways of learning it. And I know for myself, it sticks a little better when I'm learning in real life situations. And and also, when you start to working with your kids, and you're out in the garden, you'll find that it can open up too for different conversations. You're not only you can be planning some recipes, all the things you like to eat, but you're tending your little piece of earth. And the kids too, it can open up to the broader, tending the earth we live on. And with that, in combination of instilling that love of nature, to me, it's what better way to instill a love of nature than with gardening? And they get that real up close connection to nature. But if the kids have that love of nature, then when they often they'll be bombarded with climate crisis, environmental crisis. And I was at a meeting and it was about an environmental meeting, and there was some youth there too, and they're trying to get kind of the messages from the local grassroots and bring it up to the government. But so they're asking some of the youth some questions about their concerns, and they're saying, in school and that, we're always getting overwhelmed with this, environmental crisis, climate crisis and like, what are we to do?
Mhm.
And if they have that love of nature, then they can let that love they feel direct their actions.
Mm.
And something, I had that instilled in me really young, and I live right in the forest here. And the lumber companies wanted to clear cut the forest right around where we live. So our community got together and we created what was called like an eco museum, which is a museum without walls. And the purpose was to keep our forest intact, to preserve our way of life, and also the historical way of life of there's a Métis people when they are displaced with the rebellion. They were kind of scattered, and there was a whole community that moved up into the forest here because of they could live off the land, and there was a railway here. So we wanted to preserve that history too. Mm. And so that's like an action that came about because of that love of nature. And we were able to get it out of the cutting plan. And so I hope that's a little inspiration for folks to get your kids, get them out in the garden or some nature-based project with your kids. You could be, like I used to, when I lived in the city, I was always searching out the green spots, and so, even in your neighborhood, go looking around and see what wild plants are growing there. And I love to go foraging to me, there's such an abundance out in nature there. And same with the garden, a little tiny seed, it'll grow into multiple fruits and vegetables. So it really create that abundance.
Very nice. So any last thoughts on the benefits of homegrown goodness?
Well, I was talking about that the kids are out there. They're not only just growing that nutritious foods, and you've got that peace of mind, you're knowing what's going into your food. They're learning those life lessons and becoming independent, responsible. They can build up some resistance as there's going to be problems and things to overcome. But gardening can be not only growing that fresh, nutritious food, you can also be growing wholesome kids. And so I have a Gardening with Kids playbook to get you started that has like the step-by-step taking you all the way from planning out your garden to bringing in the harvest. I've even got some garden recipes in there for you.
Nice. Wow. Look forward to checking that out. I know my kids are a little bit older, and we haven't done a garden in years, but I'm inspired now.
Get them in the dirt.